Hello and welcome to Storytime in Nature. I'm Coral Bass with Manatee County Parks and Natural Resources in beautiful Robinson Preserve. This month we've been talking about mangroves. Mangroves are a plant that are very important to our coastal environment. What's a plant? A plant is any living thing or living organism that produces food, like these leaves on the mangrove, and have a root system. You can actually see the green of these leaves have chlorophyll in them, and that helps them make their own food. Now, these plants are not just important to our coastal environment. In fact, you can find them all the way up through the panhandle of Florida to the panhandle, all the way down south through the Caribbean. These are very important. So come along with me and discover all that make mangroves super important in our story time. The Sea, the Storm, and the Mangrove Tangle by Lynn Cherry. Over a shallow, salty tropical sea, a flock of pelicans flew around a mangrove island. Can you pretend to be a pelican? Get your arms nice and wide. Then maybe you too can pretend to fly. So put your arms out. Good job. From the branches of this tangle of mangroves dangled long sprouting seeds called propagules. As a pelican landed, it jostled a branch and a propagule fell into the sea. For weeks, the propagule was carried by a strong current until it came to rest on the shore of a faraway lagoon. So why don't you sway ever so slowly, like you're in the water. Maybe you're that propagule floating along the tide. So sway back and forth. There it took root, sprouted leaves, and began to grow for decades in the hot Caribbean sun. As tides rose and fell, it slowly grew and sent out prop roots to help it stand. By its 15th year, its vast network of roots anchored its little mangrove tree, allowing it to survive storms. It was now quite a distinctive tree. Do you see it? Just like you, a mangrove is going to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. Can you see its root system? We talked about roots earlier and their leaves. Makes them up. A mangrove tree crab scuttles by and exclaims, "How can a tree grow in this salty sea?" She climbed the seedling to eat its leaves and made the mangrove her home. Mangrove, oysters, sea anemones, and a coral settle on the roots. Small fiddler crabs dashed and darted about below the high tide line and disappeared into the holes under the mangrove roots. A periwinkle tree snail came upon the mangrove seedling and thought, "I can eat the algae that grows on these roots," so it stayed on to live there. Mangrove leaves fell into the water, decomposed, that means break down, and turned into muck. In this mucky seagrass began to grow. So deep in the muck. Muck is like just mud. Think of thick, thick, thick mud. Can you see the amount of life that's coming in here? Several more years passed, and the mangrove tree became larger, sending out more branches and prop roots. It grew flowers that were pollinated by the wind. Can you make wind? Blow. Driftwood floating across the sea carried knoll lizards to the mangrove tree. We can eat the ants, mosquitoes, and other insects that crawl and fly over the flowers, they thought. Hummingbirds hid their nests within the mangrove's tangled branches, while the caterpillar and the mangrove tree crab nibbled on its leaves. Can you pretend to have pinchers like a crab? So make your hand into kind of like a C shape, like this. You can see, and then pinch. Become a crab. After the mangrove flowers dropped their petals, propagules formed. These living seeds grew long and heavy until they fell down between the mangrove root into the seagrass. There, the new propagules began to grow. A seahorse carried his baby in a pouch in his belly. Here is a good place for my babies to hide, he thought, and gently released them into the seagrass bed. Mama shrimp and fish laid their eggs there. Grunts and mangrove snappers fed in the seagrasses at night, and during the day hid from bigger fish among the mangrove roots. So see, look at the fish population, the amount of fish in here. There's lots of different animals and different types of fish. It's not just one. Pretty amazing, right? But this is the little propagule right here. Let me show you. That's the little propagule. That's what they're talking about with the seedling. The baby mangrove. The propagules grew into many mangroves. For 70 years, this mangrove tangle grew and spread out farther and farther. And look at who's come. Dolphins found the water around the mangroves teeming with fish and decided to stay. Manatees came to feed in the seagrass, and they too made the waters around their mangroves home. So now you have not just the little creatures, but we're now getting big creatures that need bigger habitat, so bigger homes. 100 years had passed since the first propagule planted itself, and the Mangrove Tangle had become a big mangrove island. As a flock of pelicans dove for fish, 2 fishermen came by. One said, "Let's cut these mangroves down and create a shrimp farm." The other fisherman replied, "But these mangroves are the only trees that can grow in the salty sea water. Many of the fish in the ocean start their lives in nurseries around these mangrove islands. If we destroy the mangroves, we destroy the fish, which give us all life." And so they went out to sea and left the island in peace. That's super important, isn't it? To think about what the animals need, not just us humans. What do they need to survive? Two pelicans tucked themselves in the mangrove and thought, "Here we can build a nest and dive for fish." Herons came to hunt for shrimp, crabs, and small fish. A magnificent frigate puffed up its large red pouch to impress his mate. There is lots of life here now. Can you puff up your chest like a frigate bird? So stick your chest out. That's how they say hi to the ladies. One afternoon, a pelican flew to the mangrove island. Breathless, she cautioned, "Beware! Prepare! A storm brews! A wild wind blows this way! Come on, let's do a good wild wind! Blow it all out!" She called to the creatures of the air. "Come hide deep within the tangled branches of the mangroves." The manatees lifted their noses in the air and sniffed. Come on, give it a good sniff. Good. Yes, There was the sweet, damp scent of rain. On the horizon, they saw, far away, plumes of rain. That means big chunks of rain descending from a raft of dark clouds. A hurricane was on its way. Dun, dun, dun! The seagrasses called to the creatures of the sea, "Come with us! Beneath the roots in the center of the mangroves, we will be safe." So they swam, crawled, scurried, and slithered to the shelter of the mangrove roots. All sorts of them. You've got rays, you've got all sorts of butterfly fish, all seahorses, crabs, all trying to get deep within the mangrove to the safety. Got to get to the safety. That evening, the breeze became a screaming tempest. That means it's a loud storm. Thick, dark, frothing clouds raced through the sky. "The hurricane is here!" the animals cried. Winds sang and moaned through the mangrove tangle, lashing, breaking, and tearing branches. The birds held on, fighting the power of the hurricane through the night. Under the sea, the sand churned as huge wave tossed and turned the fish and seahorses, trying to rip the mangrove roots from their hold on the sea floor. The next morning, all was still. The sun shone from behind the retreating purple clouds, and a mangrove propagule floated away on the current. Look at the island. Has it changed? Do you see any differences? The birds came out from the safety of the mangrove's damaged branches. The periwinkle tree snails timidly peeked out from their shells and looked around. The fish, the crabs, and the seahorse swam out from protection of the mangrove roots. All were safe. Meanwhile, the mangrove propagule, blown by the storm, came to rest on the shore of a faraway lagoon. I mean, look, you can see all the different creatures that are in here. You've got the night heron, you've got some herons and egrets, those are birds. You've got some seahorses, you can see the mangrove snapper. You've got lots of different life hanging out there. Still there, the turtle even. I didn't even see him. 10 years have passed. Dead branches still tell the story of the hurricane. But new growth has sprouted from the mangrove's broken branches, and the mangrove island is bigger, wider, and deeper. Now, while pelicans dry their feathers and dolphins jump, roll, and play in the waves, manatees lazily loll in the seagrass bed, while a heron hunts in the shallow, and a hawk screeches. The mangrove propagule, carried on the waves to a faraway lagoon, has grown into a little mangrove tree, and there it will continue to grow and grow and grow. The end. As we can see, mangroves are magnificent. These living things are island builders. That means they hold onto the soil, allowing other things to grow up around it, right? So that's awesome and that's magnificent. Not only that, they're called keystone species. That's a living thing that gives life to other living things, partially because they build those habitats, those homes, but because of all the animals that live in it, right? So what animals did you see? Think about it. Name me a couple animals. Probably saw manatees, and you saw fish, and you saw birds of all different birds and all different fish, like seahorses and whatnot. You saw all those species. You saw crabs. You saw snails. You talked about a knoll, so those are a lizard. Right? So they cover a wide range of species, but not just the adults, right? They're also a nursery, so a spot where the young can come and survive. It's very, very healthy. They get a chance, so they can hide in those nooks and crannies of the root systems and in the nooks and crannies of all the leaves. So that's really important for them. So they offer protection. Now, when a big storm comes, you and I, we hide in our shelter, or maybe we have a place in our home we can do it. But our animals, their shelter in a hurricane are the mangroves. The mangroves are super duper important for that. So for all those reasons, mangroves are very important to our coastal environment. And it's something we should be like those fishermen in the book. We should think about and try and protect to the best of our ability. It means don't cut them down. Mind them and let them be, because all our butterflies and all our dolphins, all those creatures, they need our mangroves. Thank you again for joining us at Storytime in Nature in mangrove-filled Robinson Preserve. I hope to see you again on our next adventure. Bye-bye.